I'd like to know the demographics of who is present right now. Like how many of you actually are product managers? So two, three things I want to know, like how many of us are currently in product management? The second is how many of us are currently aspiring to be product managers? And if there is anybody on the call who doesn't know what product management is. So that will help me structure my answers.
Right. So I just ran a poll. So most 40% people are like in their college.
Okay.
We have about 13 people like working,
Mm-hmm.
and like 3 people are working in product teams. So the
Okay.
others are working who want to switch to product.
Okay, sounds good. So I think we have a good amount of mix of both the crowd. Is there anybody on the call who doesn't know what product management is? So we can just talk about the elephant in the room and then we can get started.
I think we can assume that knowledge would also be helpful, because I think like a lot of people would have heard the term but wouldn't have a clear idea. So you can like give a brief idea about it.
Sure. So if you Google what product management is, you'll get like 10 tons of definitions, and every definition differs from each other. I'll tell you what I have garnered over my experience as a product manager. So a product manager is essentially responsible for a feature or a product in general. By product, anything tangible that you use can be called a product. So a product can be an app that you use on your smartphone. A product can be the laptop that you're using right now to join this call. A product can be even a spoon or a fork. So largely this talk will be about technical product management, because I am a technical product manager, so I can only tell you about that. So what we largely do is that we build services that use technology to solve a problem for the customer. Now, what a product manager does is that product manager is responsible for the end-to-end execution of a product, right from identifying why a product is needed in the first place, identifying what the problems are, how success will look like, and then defining what the solutions could be, then looking into how the solution, there can be like 100 solutions to a problem. You find out what's the easiest one to do, which can have the maximum impact. Then once you have identified that, you go into the execution phase. Contrary to popular belief, execution is the easiest part that a product manager does. And once a product is executed, then the hard part becomes still like how you measure your success. And once you identify whether your solution is successful or not, and it is very, very likely that you might end up building something which doesn't do anything, which is perfectly fine. But the more important part is, what did you learn out of building the whole process? And once you identified what is wrong, what is right, then you go on iterating the solution till you come across what you initially envisioned it to be. So if I have to rephrase it for the very, very layman that didn't understand anything that I said. So when you watch a movie, initially there's a casting in which they talk about the protagonist, the hero, heroine, the musician, the cinematographer, the choreographer, everybody. And the last page comes about the director. There's a last section which shows just the director's name. What does a director do in a movie? He doesn't write, he doesn't act, he doesn't produce sound, he doesn't handle the camera. What does a director do in a movie? He just ensures that everything works as he had envisioned it to work. So that can be a very good analogy regarding as to what a product manager does. He takes an idea and makes a product out of it. Similarly, a director takes a idea about a story and makes a movie out of it. So that's a very common analogy that you can find. But product management is a very broad field in general. There are nitty-gritties that change from one industry to the next. But in general, it's mostly about problem discovery, solution discovery, execution, and then measurement of how the solution performed. So that's more or less what product management is.
Right. So like you said, it varies from industry to industry, company to company, right? So and like you said, like there are different things. One is the ideation and trying to understand the problem and figuring out the solution. Then there's a implementation part. So where is most of your time spent? Like in your current role, I mean, it would have varied over time. You can take us through that, like how your current role is, what you do, where most of your time is spent, and how it has changed over time, like across companies.
Okay. So I'll start from Zoomcar first. So I started product management in Zoomcar. It was a very small company, and it really matters a lot from company to company and the culture that the company follows. So what happens is it really depends on at what stage the company is. So if it is a smaller setup, like you are just like 5-10 people working on an app, then speed is the highest concern. Like you want to get to the market fast. You are ready to experiment, you are ready to fail fast, and you are ready to fail fast enough. So you are experimenting with a lot of things. So if a company is at very early stage of growth, they would prefer to get things faster. So then as a product manager, you don't spend a lot of time finding the perfect solution. You spend a lot of time finding the easiest solution to a problem. It might not be perfect. And you try to get that solution out as fast as possible and learn as much as possible, because you are a new company. You want to learn as much and try to achieve what you are trying to do. When I moved to Grab, it was already a larger setup. So speed takes a back foot there. What you want to ensure is that you already know a lot of market that you are already present in. You know what your users are. You know what they want. So when there's a lot of data, then little more structure comes into the problem. So by structure, what I mean is that you can have a more definite problem statement, what you are trying to solve. Then you spend a lot of time defining the problem. You then spend a lot of time coming up with solutions to what are the solutions to that particular problem. Then one big part that comes in bigger setups is that stakeholder management takes a larger chunk. So in like Zoomcar, if I had to solve a problem, I mostly needed to just convince my engineer to build that product. At Grab, if I had a similar problem to solve, I might have to like talk to the country head of that country that I'm launching to. I might have to talk to the regulators. I might have to talk to the account personnel. I might have to talk to the compliance guys. I might have to talk to accounting. So a small change actually involves a large gamut of people, and stakeholder management takes a larger chunk. Now coming to Zendesk, it's a software as a service company. So, and it's a B2B setup. Businesses buy the software in B2C. So for those who don't know B2C, B2B, it's business to consumers is B2C, in which like something like Facebook or like Flipkart is a business that the consumers consume. And then there are products that businesses consume, like they're B2B products, which is businesses to business. So imagine, let's say there's a product called Office 365. It's a subscription service. So that is something that other businesses use, and Microsoft is a business that sells them. So what they would do is that they would try to like approach a company, try to sell their software. So the biggest difference in B2B that I have realized so far is that problem statements are very well defined. So in B2C, if you're trying to move a metric, you have to do a lot of guesswork based on data. Like, okay, the customers might be facing this problem. Then you go and find out how many customers face that problem. And because you are trying to solve problems for a very large pool of people, there are different problems to a solution. But in B2B, there's a very specific solution that companies come up with. Like in Zendesk, if there's a feature that a company wants, they wouldn't say that, hey, we are facing this problem. They would say that, hey, I want this button to be placed on this page so that I can access faster. So the definition of problems become very different. So as a product manager, the problem statement changes. You don't have to spend a lot of time discovering the problem, but you do have to validate the problem, because a client might be suggesting you one feature, but you have hundreds and thousands of clients. You have to go ahead and check whether every other client is facing that feature or not, whether that client brings you sufficient revenue that you want to build a separate feature for them. Then there's a lot of different metrics that you have to track. Let's say Uber comes and says to Zendesk that we want this particular feature. I don't think anybody will be questioning them, why would you need that feature, because they are such a big client that they bring such revenue and value in terms of money. So we'll just build it for them. So it's a lot about how business values drive your decision. And so it's very, very different from different setups. Similarly, I can give you an example of companies that deal with hardwares. Let's say you are using iPhones, let's say you are using Macs right now. So any small change that you do in the product, you have to talk to the supply chain expert, making sure that whatever change that you do in the hardware, the industrial designer can build it on time. Whether Foxconn can deliver it on time, whether your supply chain network is sufficient, is strong enough that that change that you're making will not affect the deadline that you have for shipment. So there are multiple cogs that are there in multiple industries. Software product management is relatively easier because uh, you don't have to deal with a lot of supply chain constraints. It's mostly UI, UX, and software development processes that you deal with on a daily basis. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah. So, like you said, the biggest difference between a B2B working in a B2B setup is that the problems are like you get an idea of the problems more easily because the clients directly tell them to you.
Right.
And in a B2C setup, it's more like you have to go looking for the problems basically through data.
One more thing that I missed is that in B2C, you have the power to experiment. You can experiment with a lot of solutions. In B2B, you don't have that. You don't have that freedom because oftentimes the product that you are building, the company has invested millions of dollars to get to use that product. And let's say if we just make a change right now without telling any of the companies, their agents, who are like thousands of agents, are used to that workflow. They might just get confused like what is happening right now, and that will completely obstruct their workflow. So changes are as a product manager, you have to be more susceptible to what changes you are doing, and unless something is really important, you make sure that you do the communication before, rather than just making a change. In B2C, you can just make a change. Uh, then again, quality of the product also differs. Let's say if you roll out a feature in B2C and there's some bug that is there, you can quickly go back and fix that bug and just maybe do some appeasement to the people who got affected by it. But you can't do that in B2B, because if you have a bug in B2B, you have already caused a lot of millions of dollars lost to some company in their processes, and they'll come back and sue you. So the quality of the product also matters. That by quality, I mean that whatever you deliver doesn't have a lot of bugs. In fact, has as minimal bugs as possible. So yeah, that's also a very important factor to check.
Right. So again, like you mentioned that a lot of these decisions are driven by business metrics. You have to keep in mind like what metrics the company is looking to drive, and you also probably have to keep in mind what is technically feasible, and like all these factors. So because most people are trying to get into this role, like what are the skills that you use on a day-to-day basis, like in this role, like both technical and like managerial, and what are the skills that you think someone should have in this role?
Sure.
And another question we have is like, how do I know if this field is like right for me? I mean, are there any inherent characteristics of like a product manager?
Okay, so let me answer the last question first.
Yeah.
I can't tell you whether this field is right for you. That is something you need to discover yourself. Similarly, like since I can't tell whether you like pineapple on a pizza or not. So this is something that you have to try whether you like it or not. So I can definitely answer the first question, which is what skills are required on a daily basis. So for a fresher, if you are just a guy in college, so the good part about product management is there's hardly any prerequisite for this. All you need to be is a logical person who has an open mind. And if you are a logical person who has an open mind, you can try this trade. In terms of what skills a product manager needs on a daily basis, so the first one that I would say is you need to be a good listener. You need to empathize with the people, because you are building a product for someone. Like any other human will be using it. So you need to first understand the problem that you're solving. So for that, empathy becomes the biggest skill that a PM needs to have. So if you're empathetic to understanding a problem, you will definitely understand what pain points the end user is going through. That is one. The second is logical and structured thinking. You need to question a lot. In fact, I say that a product manager is a person who asks the hardest questions. So if you're working for a company, or even if you're building your own product, start with why. Why are you building it? If the why will be, the why needs to answer a problem that you are going to solve. Then the second question you're building is who you are building for. If there's a problem, that problem might just be for one person. Let's say Bill Gates wants, uh, Bill Gates doesn't like a particular product, but the rest of the world likes it because that product is free. Bill Gates wants that product to be paid. That's Bill Gates' problem, but not anybody else's problem. So that's, if you're building that product, you might just be building for Bill Gates, but not anybody else. So if you have identified a problem, the second question you need to identify is who you are building for. You need to have a sizable market that the problem, for whom the problem exists. And once you have identified the problem, and once you have identified who you are building for, then you identify how you are building that. So that's the first part becomes problem discovery. The problem discovery identifies the problem and like who is facing the problem. And the second part becomes like solution discovery, like how are you going to solve the problem. So that's all that is needed. You need to be detail oriented when you think about things. So things to check in that is that if you are just a college, if you are just a college undergrad right now, you haven't graduated, it's very difficult to get courses about product management. Even I'll be very frank, I got to know about product management after I graduated in my first job, and I didn't know about product management at all when I was at Kharagpur. So what you can do is that you just need to have a detailed understanding of how technical product management works. Detailed understanding of how software development works. A good example of that is like just pick an app from your phone and just imagine if you were the CEO of that company, how would you go about building that app? So that would encompass things like, let's say if I were to build Twitter, so I would first start by asking what problem does Twitter solve? Then how many people have this problem? And the third problem, I'll then figure out what would I need to solve this problem. And so just pick an app that you like and think you are the CEO of that product, and just start writing down what would you need. So that will give you a good understanding of what a product manager does on a daily basis. It's very, very similar. And the last skill that you need is just good communication. If you are somebody who is easy to talk to people, you can become a very good product manager. Why am I saying this is that nobody actually reports to the product manager. Product manager needs to get work done from designers. They need to get work done from developers. They need to get work done from marketing people and on-ground people. So nobody actually reports to you. You're not boss of anyone there, but you have to get work done from everyone. So you just need to be a good human being to everybody else. They need to see a friend in you, and because you have to make them work for you. So good communication and it just happy attitude helps in general. Apart from that, there are some specific technical skills that you can check. It's just like you can take down a few terms, which is agile product development and what are scrums, how engineers develop code. Like they first develop it on a staging server, then they roll it out to production server. Then there are multiple QA steps involved. Then what is the rollout process? These things are available very easily on the internet, and you can just Google how software development works, and you can just find out more about it. Apart from that, you should be good at approaching a problem. You should be able to break down a problem before coming up with solutions to it. A bad product manager is somebody who jumps onto a solution. A good product manager is who understands more, who dedicates more time understanding the problem, and then takes every possible data point into account, and then comes up with a solution, not jumps on a solution. And oftentimes product managers need to take decisions when there's insufficient data, especially in smaller setups. When you're working in a smaller company, you wouldn't have a lot of data and you are still expected to make a decision. So you need to have some gut feeling with you as well when it comes to decision making. I'm not saying it's a skill that you need to have, but you need to have reasonable confidence in what you're doing. So confidence in something is also that helps. So I think that's a long list of skills that I think that is there.
So I guess like all these skills evolve over time, right? So
yeah, definitely. So nobody expects you to be a jack of all trades on day one.
And so how has it like, evolved for you? Let's say when you started out versus right now, like what are the major things that you see growing in the skills section, or like professionally, like what is the growth that you've seen in product management?
Sure, that's a very interesting question. So I'll be very honest. When I joined as a product manager, I didn't know how to use Excel properly, and the first couple of weeks is just was me trying to learn through SQL and how to deal with data. So data analysis is something that I struggled with in the beginning. I had to spend a lot of sleepless nights going through SQL tutorials, going through Excel tutorials, so that I can find the data that I'm looking for. That was also helpful that Zoomcar didn't have a lot of analysts at that point of time. So product managers were expected to get their own data. So that is something that was very difficult for me initially. But yes, over the time I got very comfortable with data, and that just came with the virtue of using more and more data every day. The second thing was like I had some experience of working with design when I was in college. So I just did a bit of graphic designing, but I didn't have a lot of understanding of UI and UX. And the only understanding of UI and UX comes through reading a bit about it and talking to users. I think like the product that you are building for, whom you are building for, just talk to them. People are very happy to talk to at most of the times, and you'll get a lot of understanding from that. So data analysis and UX and UI was something that I fumbled with in the beginning. And over the time, I learned about how software development process works, and that was on-job training. So these were some of the things that were difficult initially, but I think I'm much more comfortable now. One thing that definitely grows with time is the confidence that you have when talking to people. Is that initially, you as a product manager, you are expected to rally like 20-25 people to a solution. You are expected to convince everyone that, hey, this is the right solution that you are looking at, and everybody should follow that solution. But in your mind also, you know that there are like some doubts and some uncertainties that there are. So initially, it just comes with time, like how you address a crowd. But over the time, it gets easier. Right now, if I have to, even when I'm unsure of a problem and a solution, it's easier for me to go and talk to a bunch of like 40-45 people and tell them that, hey, this is the problem we are solving. These are the solutions. We are unsure of the data, but we think that this is the best solution in the current set of whatever information we have got, and this is what we should go ahead with. So you need that confidence part comes up over time, and that also comes up with experience, because frankly, every product that you are working is a new problem statement, and you are expected to come across things that you haven't thought of. And it's okay to just know about it's okay to not know about everything before launching a product, because after all, we are humans, we can't foresee everything. So as long as you are able to tell people that what you know and what you don't know, and you are able to communicate that clearly to your stakeholders, it should be fine. So over the time, I guess like software development skills, talking to people, stakeholder management is what grows with experience. Apart from that, it's the same day-to-day business. You write the same kind of PRDs. PRDs is product requirement document. It's the one important document that a product manager writes. So, and it's in the execution phase. So I can talk about more about it later. So yes, if you ask about what skills grow over time, it's talking to people and software development process, and how to handle data and use data to come across to use data to extract meaningful information from it. So that is something that you learn with time.
Right. So, I mean, again, for like people who want to get into product roles, uh, so in your case, you had directly got a role as a product manager at Zoomcar.
Right.
Is that possible these days? Would companies hire directly as a product manager, or what are the other roles that they can look for, like associate product manager or a product analyst, for someone who wants to eventually become a product manager?
Sure. So, yes, companies are hiring right now, and of course, a product manager starts somewhere, right? So it's not like people just become like graduate with product management degrees and become product managers. So every product manager that you come across had been doing something else before that. I was a geologist when I graduated, so and I'm doing product management right now. Google is hiring people from sociology and psychology background to become product managers right now. So it's definitely there are openings everywhere, and there definitely are entry level roles. What I can help you is that what what expectations are usually set for an entry level product managers, and what do we actually look for an entry level product manager. So the first thing that I would look for is how do you approach a problem. Every interview that I take for somebody who wants to become a product manager is how do you approach a problem. Always, usually a first principle thinking helps. If you don't know what first principle thinking is, you should write that down and Google it later. And it's basically just starting with the most basic assumptions and then building, adding more information on top of it. And then you should be inquisitive, you should be curious about things. If you don't understand anything, you should be the one person who asks more about it. So the more information that you can ask for is is a skill that I look for in an interview. And I would like to know, I'd like to check like what kind of assumptions you come across. So one good way to prepare for product management interviews is uh, just go through a lot of cases. I think Case in Point is one good book that is suggested to every junior in college when they are preparing for interviews, and Case in Point helps in product management interviews as well. There's another book called uh, Cracking the PM Interview. I don't find that very useful, but it's a good read for a beginner. That's one. For design, you can go across some books. A very good book is Don't Make Me Think. It's a very small, it's a very like a light read, and it's very well written in general. It's very engrossing. So you can start with Don't Make Me Think. And then there's, if you want to go into little more advanced how UI UX works, is then there's this book called Design of Everyday Things. And if you want to know more about problem solving, then there are books like Sprint by Jake Knapp, which I really love. And then there's strategy development books like Blue Ocean Strategy. You don't have to read all of it, but start with at least Don't Make Me Think and Sprint. These two books are definitely must read for a product manager. Apart from, how do you want to approach, if you are a college graduate, like undergrad, and you want to eventually become a product manager, one thing that I would advise you not to do is approach people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to become a product manager. Do you have a job in your company where I can apply to? Please keep in mind that that's not my job to look for a job for you. So what I can help you with is that you need to show me enough enthusiasm that I do some work for you. So one suggestion that I have is that if you really like a product, first you need to identify a product that you like. You shouldn't just be that I want to become a product manager. Wherever I want get an opportunity, I'll become one. Don't start like that. Find a product that you actually believe in, that you actually want to work for, and then spend some time understanding that product. Maybe download that app, read about that company, have a few ideas how that can be improved. And frankly, you don't need to be a product manager to come up with ideas. Anybody can come up with ideas. A product manager is just somebody who takes an idea and takes it to execution. But a product manager is not the person who necessarily always comes up with an idea. So if you are approaching a person, and you should always try to find people. So first identify a company or an app that you would like to work for. Then try to know more about it. Try to download that, read more about it, have a few ideas that can how in which ways how that can be improved, and then approach people on LinkedIn. Give them a small background about yourself, that hey, I want to move to product management. and I really liked your app, or I really found that these are the gaps in your app that you can maybe think about. And then first of all, find the link of the job. Usually companies have a career portal. Find the link of the job, give them the link, and ask them, hey, can you refer me for this? If you do that versus you just ping somebody, hey, is there a job for me in your company? The conversion rates in both of the cases will be very, very different. So just follow this structure and try to solve problems on a daily basis. Take a problem, uh, take a case problem, try to solve that. Try to build, just take an app, try to like how, just think about how you can improve that. Try to document it as well. If you have enough reach of the document, people might just approach you themselves as well. So yes, there are definitely companies hiring, but you need to be a little more structured while approaching those companies rather than just cold messaging every one of them.
So how did you do it? I know it's been a long time, but how did you make the switch from like the oil industry to applying for product management? Did you plan it out? Did you prepare things and then start approaching companies, or was it very accidental?
No, it wasn't accidental, I would say, but I definitely started looking for. So earlier, I wasn't sure whether product management is right for me. So I was applying for operations and product management roles. Then I spoke to a lot of product managers from Kharagpur network itself. I just like pinged them that, hey, can I have a little bit of your time? And people usually are okay talking. And I just asked them like, hey, what do you do on a daily basis? And just try to understand what product managers do. So I spent like a week understanding whether I want to become a product manager or not. Then I spent another week trying to find out what companies are offering product management jobs, and out of those companies, which company do I think will eventually work? What do I believe in products? So I found like 3-4 companies in there, and usually alumni connections help. So in those 5 companies, I think I could find somebody from Kharagpur in like 2 or 3 of them, and the rest of them I just applied through career portals. And so at that point of time, it was I started applying in 2015. So uh, the situation was a bit better than what it is right now. That there were not a lot of product managers roaming around in Bangalore at that point of time. So people were open to approaching a complete fresher at that point of time. So the kind of interviews that I had to go through was basically case studies. Uh, I was given a problem and I was asked to solve that, and the structure in which and the way I approached the problem was tested. And I did follow the same thing that I suggested to you before. Like I tried to know what the product is. I usually ping people that, hey, maybe I really like the work that you are doing. Maybe I think that you guys should also look into this. I think that might be a good revenue stream for you guys. Or maybe you guys should also build this feature. I think a lot of people might actually need that feature. So that if you are helping somebody in their day-to-day job, that gets their attention, and they're more likely to respond to your queries. So in my case, I applied to like 5 companies. Fortunately, all 5 of them lined up interviews for me. And like I was offered eventually in 2 companies, and I chose Zoomcar to work with. And yeah, that's how it happened. So it wasn't completely accidental, I would say. I stumbled across product management accidentally, but the way you approach companies should be always be structured.
So for freshers, I think a lot of companies like Flipkart go to campus for APM roles.
Right.
Like does Zendesk do that, or does Zendesk hire freshers like as APMs or?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
But so Zendesk. So I'm the youngest individual PM in Zendesk right now.
Okay.
So it's and that too after 5 years, 5+ years of product management experience.
Right.
So there are some companies who definitely look for more prior experience, but you will always find companies.
I mean, Grab and Zoomcar might be more open.
Zoomcar, yes, I'm not sure about Grab. See, the problem is that I don't think Grab has a problem hiring freshers. It's
Okay.
just like visa might be an issue because they need to show to the government that the worker they are hiring is a skilled worker, and they need to prove that he has like this degree and this much experience. So Grab might have different problems. I don't think Grab has a problem hiring freshers in general, as long as the individual is smart enough and can
Right.
break down problems. but there are tons of companies in India who are ready to hire freshers, and I would say that there are like at least 200 times more companies right now compared to when I was looking for the job.
Right.
So there are many more opportunities right now, but so is the competition. A lot of people didn't know about product management. In fact, it took me 1 year for me to make my family understand what I do. So it was that, but now I think a lot of people know what product management is. So there are definitely companies hiring. What I have told you is a structure that will work most of the times. I definitely cannot guarantee whether every company will respond to you, but if you take a structured approach, spend some time understanding their product, that will definitely help. Not just in setting up interviews, during the interviews as well. So yeah, that's how you should approach a company in general.
So what is like in these days, what is like the hiring process like for APMs or entry level roles?
Right. So see, for entry level roles, the biggest problem is the top of the funnel. And for people on the call who don't understand what top of the funnel means, so there's a conversion terminology that product manager use a lot. Is like if you are building a product, which, let's say, take the example of Flipkart. So you go to flipkart.com, then you add something in your cart, then you go to the cart page, then you make the payment, and then the product gets delivered to you. So let's say 1000 people come on the first page, only 500 people add the product in their cart, only 100 pay for the payments. Out of those 100, maybe 90 got successful payments, and only 90 products eventually got sold. So out of the 1000 people that came to your website, only 90 people eventually bought the product. So the top of the funnel is the largest section of largest interface to any company. So for entry level jobs, the problem is the pool is very high. So at times what happens is that your CV hardly gets like 10-15 seconds for a review. So I have come across a lot of CVs by college graduates which are like roughly 4 pages long. I don't know, dude. Like, I didn't do enough work, which was 4 pages long back in college. I still have like a 1 page CV. And I would recommend that whatever you want to highlight, you should highlight in the top 1/4 page of your CV, because nobody else is reading for the rest of the part.
So
So
what are you looking for in a CV of, let's say, a fresher? What
right,
can they have that stands out? Because there are thousands of CVs coming to companies, right?
right. So what I'm looking for is a problem. I'm looking for an approach. I'm looking for a solution, and I'm looking for a result. So whatever you did in your college lifetime, you should come up with one thing that you can structure as a problem. You can tell your approach, you can tell a solution, and you can tell a result. The easiest thing for anybody who hasn't done any extracurricular, even in college, you have done your BTP, you have done your MTP. You cannot graduate without it. So if you have done your BTP, you have done something very similar. You came across a problem, you defined an approach, you did a solution or an experiment, and you declared a result. If you can structure that as as something that you took from a problem to an execution, that will take you to a product management interview. The KTJ or the SF or PORs will not get you to a product management role.
And so for people who have like time, let's say they have, 12 months left, 10 months left, what is it that they can do to reflect on the CV? Like for
That's
a,
a question. If you have a lot of time, a technical bent always helps. If you are from coding background, that really helps. I'm not from a coding background, but I'm still a product manager. So you can become a product manager even though you don't have necessarily coding skills. You just need to have an understanding. But if you do have time, if you do have time, why not build an app? Just build a simple app. Identify a problem, identify a set of target group that you are solving for. It might just be 100 users. You might just build a simple app for your college community, and you should have a unique selling proposition, USP, what we call. You should have a differentiating factor in what you do. You shouldn't copying somebody else. You shouldn't be copying somebody else, and you should have a tangible result. If you don't want to build an app, you can just build like a small solution, like uh, if you face a problem in college, like uh, at 2 a.m. in the night, if there's not enough food sufficient, like not sufficient food available, if you went ahead and solved that problem, how did you solve that problem? That is something a product manager will be interested in. Let's say, so in my time, college canteens were usually open around 3 a.m. But if somebody was hungry at 4 a.m., it was really difficult finding food for them. So if, let's say, I'm just solving that problem, so I'll write in my CV that solved for night deliveries of food for, let's say, X number of people. Then I'll write a bit about how did I solve that. And I'll write a result of I was able to successfully deliver food to, let's say, 500 people. I'm not saying you have to deliver food. I'm just giving an example of what kind of problem and solution that you look like. But try to find something in your college career that was a problem and you came up with a solution for that. That will help the most, I would say.
Right. And so again, like so that would help reflect in your CV. I think what is usually the next round, like after, let's say, your CV gets shortlisted?
So if your CV gets shortlisted, then I think the most important thing becomes your communication skills, and your problem solving strategy, for problem solving approach. If you can be a great problem solver, but if you are not able to communicate your approach to the interviewer, it doesn't help. So you should build on your communication strategy. It's okay to fumble, but it's not okay to have an unsound logic.
So what's usually asked in these interviews?
So usually what we do is that we usually give a problem, oftentimes a problem that we are facing, uh, because it helps two cases. It gives you more understanding of what kind of problems you will be working on when you join the company, and and it also helps us take in an interview, because if we are giving a problem that we are facing and you give me a solution, you might actually give me a very good solution that might solve my problem. So it usually helps, and I tend to give unless it is data sensitive and competitor sensitive, I just give a problem that I'm working on. So I'll give an example. Uh, so one of the things that we did at Grab, and this is a problem that I worked on, is that uh, if you know about those cycle sharing or e-scooter sharing services, so they usually, what happens is that you can pick them up from a definite point and you have to drop them off at a definite point, and then you get charged for the time you have consumed that service. There are bad people always around. There can be people who just leave them somewhere in the middle of the road or just dump it somewhere. So in Singapore, that was a big problem. The government is very strict and when it comes to laws here, and they didn't want any stray scooters. That is a term that we used to call those scooters on the road at all. So the problem statement that we were given with was that we had to bring the stray scooter numbers from X percentage, which was when we launched the product. I cannot tell you the exact percentage, to less than 1% within like a month. So that was the problem statement. So we had a definite success criteria that, hey, it is at this number right now. We have to get that number down to 1%, so that government allows us to run. So that was a definite problem. And then we went ahead and tried to find out why people are actually leaving the scooters. So what we did was uh, we just pulled the data of first 200 people who had just randomly left the scooter somewhere. We called each one of them. It's tiring, but we did call each one of them, each of the 200 people. So there were me, my designer, and the UX researcher. All three of us made like 66 calls each, and we talked to like 66 people, 200 people, and we tried to came across why they actually leave the scooters where they are not at the designated places. So what we were able to do from that data was that we could identify some definite problems that was leading for people to actually leave the scooters in the middle of the road. And what we did was that we identified those problems and implemented those solutions and found solutions for those problems and implemented those solutions. So within like the first 3 weeks, we were able to get it down to roughly 3% of what it was initially, from what it was initially. And then, so what happens usually in product management is that we follow a 80-20 rule. So usually 80% of the problems are caused by 20% of the things. That's a thumb rule that you will usually notice in things. So the largest problems that you are solving are usually smaller problems, and but they'll solve the large amount of your problem. But if you have to really drill down from that 3% to 1%, you have to then be more reliant on data, talk again to people, try to find out more granular reasons, and then keep on solving them. So yes, so what essentially every problem, every product management journey starts with a problem, then you go and find out solutions, you implement the solution, then you measure success. So that kind of happens everywhere.
When you ask this question to, let's say, in an interview, that this is a problem that we're facing, like how much time do people have to answer it, and like what are you looking for in the answer? Like, I don't think everyone would arrive at a solution that is like the best solution, but like what are you looking for in that interview, and how much time do you generally?
So time actually depends on the type of interview. Usually for a 45-minute round, we try to keep it at 2 questions. So you have roughly 15 minutes per question. And what you should do is that you should work with the interviewer, is that you should ask as many questions to clarify what you are building. So you don't actually need to come up with an answer. You just need to give an approach to the interviewer, because the interviewer, if he's facing the problem, he's not looking for you to come up with an implementation of the problem. He can do that himself. What he's looking at is like how you approach the problems. If you come across an approach that the other guy hasn't thought about, that will definitely give you brownie points, but that is not expected. What you should always do is that you should try to get as much data as possible. You are allowed to make assumptions, but reasonable assumptions. If you're not comfortable making assumptions, you can ask the interviewer like, hey, what kind of, like, you can definitely ask the interviewer, like in my case, if I gave this question to somebody, I would expect them to question like, hey, why do people actually leave the scooter? How many people actually leave the scooter? Is there any consequence of them leaving the scooter? So these are the questions that you should be able to ask as many questions. You should work with the interviewer to come up with a solution. And you definitely are not required to come up with the correct answer. You are just required to come up with a structured approach to the problem. That's all.
So what would be like a good approach for this problem that you mentioned? Like,
so I'm a bit biased towards the solution because I already went through one round of it. But usually,
but like, what is a realistic? I mean, what is something that would impress you? Like, what's an approach that would impress you? A realistic one.
See, something that will impress me is that if a product manager is willing to go forward and talk to the end users as much as possible, because you have to get your hands dirty. There is no two ways about it. If somebody is ready to delve into the data, get their hands dirty with the data, try to get qualitative and quantitative feedback to approach a problem, that will impress me. Like if they say that I will go and talk to the people, I'll try to find people and ask them why are you doing this? Then I'll drill a bit more deeper regarding what kind of questions you'll ask them. But that will be the first point that will impress me, that this guy is ready to talk to them.
Right.
So,
right.
So oftentimes you will find product managers who just expect solutions to come from their team, but as a product manager, you shouldn't be ideally doing that. A product manager should be the one ready to get their hands dirty with the data as much as possible.
Right. So again, like for people applying for product analyst or business analyst roles, in like to work under a product manager, like would you be asking similar questions, or like would the approach be different? What is expected?
For a person who has done product management, I would ask different questions. For a beginner, it's usually the approach to a problem. For an experienced professional, it's usually we ask them what problems you worked on. I think somebody's mic is on. Is it possible to mute that? Okay, thanks. Thank you. So for people who have experience, we usually ask the candidate what defined problems you worked on, and how did you approach the problems and accomplish it. So instead of giving the problems, we ask them what problems you worked on, and then based on that, you can cross question it, because it's really difficult to do BS in a product interview, because if something makes sense, it makes sense. If something doesn't make sense, it doesn't. So one advice to people who are currently product managers and looking for other product management interviews is that you should since you are product managers, you would have worked on problems and come across solutions. So just prepare a good story that is linear, that ties from one end to the next, and everything flows logically. Just try to sit in front of the mirror and try to tell that story to yourself. If you're fumbling, then your story is not good. If you're able to convince yourself, then probably the story is okay for other people to listen. And apart from that, never reveal data of the company. That's a very unprofessional thing for you to do. Just you can talk about the extent of a problem without actually telling the exact magnitude quantitatively, and you shouldn't reveal anybody's data to anyone. uh, and that's considered largely unprofessional, and it's a big red flag. And don't ever think that the other product manager won't understand if you are trying, just you are making things up, because the role that you are applying for, we have been there as well. So if you are a person who is confident while talking about the problem you have worked with and the solution that you came across, it's very apparent in an interview.
And this problem can be like, let's say for people who are in business development or operations and they're looking for a product role,
can be
it
anything.
can be any problem that they've solved.
Right. Can be anything. But if you are changing jobs from a different trade to product management, we'll definitely expect some background homework that you have done, maybe some books you have read, maybe some PMs you have spoken to. We'll expect some product software development knowledge, because it's you who wants to become a product manager. Then it's you who should actually go and read a bit more about it. So there are tons of resources online. I can understand it can get overwhelming at times, but what you should do is that approach a product manager, try to do what he does on a daily basis, try to learn a bit more about software development process, what is Agile, what is Scrum, try to hone your data analysis skills. One thing that really helps is finding key metrics, because measuring success is something that a product manager needs to do on a daily basis. So for measuring success, you need to define key metrics. So defining key metrics it's not an easy task, but I have found that as a person who hasn't got product management experience, you can go through investor decks of sub company, and you can find out, because every investor deck talks about some metrics that has gone up or gone down or remains same in the last quarter or the last year. So you can see what kind of metrics that the companies talk about, and that will give you an idea of what metrics you can think of when you are like thinking of a product. You can create your own metrics as well, as long as that makes sense.
Right. So again, I'm going back to like APM roles, because is that are APM roles more in the market than PM roles? Like, what do you think?
So I do not have I do not have exact information on that on that question, but I do have seen APM roles. I haven't come across a lot of APM roles in Singapore, but I have come across a few companies which are hiring for APM roles. But APM doesn't mean entry level jobs. Like if you can apply for APM in Google, but they'll still expect you to have a software development background.
Right. So what do you think an APM does? Like, do they have the same level of, obviously they won't have the same level, but do they have the same kind of work that you mentioned as a product manager of thinking about problems, meeting with stakeholders, or is it more about analyzing the data of the product and like, where is the role more inclined to?
Right. So an APM is supposed to work under a product manager and get to learn more from him. An APM, so see, if you are the bottommost part of a food chain, you'll do the grunt work that you have to be very clear about. So yes, it will involve data analysis. You'll have to go and fetch data. Might have to write long queries to get that data. As an APM, the biggest learning that you will have is finding the right data and execution. As I said earlier in this call, is that execution is the easiest part that a product manager does. Execution is not difficult. So as an APM, you are expected to execute products. As you go up in the ladder, you start focusing more on a stakeholders and a strategy. And APM is usually told that, hey, we need to build this feature. Can you find more data whether this feature makes sense or not? And if it does make sense, can you ensure that this feature goes out? So that's what usually an APM does. A PM usually thinks of what feature needs to be built. Above to a PM is a senior product manager. Senior product manager usually takes care of a portfolio of products, not just one. And then above the senior product manager, usually there are directors of products, which take care of one vertical of products. And above above the director is usually a CPO, which is chief product officer. So a chief CPO is somebody that looks 0% into execution. His role is 100% strategy. A director maybe 10% execution, 90% strategy. Similarly at SPM, my role is 50% execution, 50% strategy, but APM is 90% execution, 10% strategy. So it's always good to think about strategy, because one thing we have learned is that even the anybody can come up with a good idea. So everybody should be encouraged about strategy, but as an APM, you'll be focused more about execution, and that is also important in terms of technical understanding and how software development works. So unless you don't understand that, you cannot go up in the ladder. So yes, for what I want to say is that you just need to have an open mind and a logical thinking approach to become an APM, and then you'll start learning things on the job.
And I think you need to be more hands-on, like you said, fetching data,
yes.
like capabilities
so
of
if
SQL.
I see SQL, Excel on a CV, that helps in your APM interview. If I see coding, like software development background, that really adds up a lot, because you are eventually working with designers. There might be a couple of designers you are working with, and you'll be working with a large team of developers. You won't get their respect unless you understand their language. I'll be very, very, very frank. You need to talk their language. And if you are a developer yourself, you'll get their respect, and it's really easy to get things done. And it also helps when they're trying to bullshit you. And you need to have enough knowledge to filter out that bullshit. So if you are somebody from software development background, that's a plus plus on your CV, but that's not necessary. But definitely SQL and Excel will help. And I frankly don't see any excuse that you don't know Excel and SQL. Doesn't take a lot of time to learn them as well. And that should be definitely on your CVs for APM roles.
Right. So before we wrap up, we'll just quickly go through some of the questions that we have, the ones we have not addressed. So like one of the questions is that, like, is an MBA a requirement, or like, is it an added advantage? Because is it like a prerequisite at some companies? Would it give you an added advantage over other people?
I applied to Google. I got called for the interview. I went through the entire rounds. I don't have an MBA, and I think Google is the toughest company to get an interview with. So you don't need an MBA.
Was it? But maybe you're already a product manager when you applied to Google, right?
For entry level, yes, they won't entertain, but you don't need an MBA for an entry level. And frankly, I have worked with MBAs not just from IIMs, but from INSEAD and Harvard and Oxford as well. And it really doesn't help. Their degree doesn't help a lot. So unless if you are going for an MBA for a good education, I wouldn't say good. I would definitely not recommend MBA for product management, because even if you do an MBA, there's no course on product management there. So I don't think MBA is required at all.
Right. I mean, even like to increase your chances, like, I mean, let's say somebody who's like, let's say right now an operations manager. Mm-hmm. Does an MBA increase his chances of becoming product manager after 1 year, or like, does he have the same odds even now if he follows a structured approach?
So yes and no. I know a few companies that definitely, like, if you have got 1,000 CVs with you, you'll definitely have to have some filter criteria, right? So an MBA becomes a filter criteria there, but it doesn't help at all in your interview, because ultimately in an interview, we are looking for a problem, an approach, and a solution. And even if you have an MBA and you can't come up with a problem, an approach, and a solution, it doesn't help. So if a problem solving attitude helps, I wouldn't say MBA doesn't help at all. It does help at times, especially as a filter criteria. But if your CV is shortlisted, then I don't think MBA helps after that.
Right. And again, like questions about the market, like the current market scenario, and maybe a little down the line also, like would there be problems with job openings for freshers, like for APM roles and
See,
product roles?
so that is there for all the markets, right? So the good part of COVID is we have identified what is essential in our society. So there are companies that are still essential. Let's say, let's take the example of Zoom. People didn't know about Zoom. A lot of people didn't know about Zoom like 3 months back. Now everybody is on this call. So there are companies that have grown in this market. They are still hiring. E-commerce is hiring. Anything that allows people to do things from the comfort of their home is growing. Things, transportation is not growing that much. Delivery services are growing. So you need to identify which markets are getting better in this scenario. And this will remain for the next 1.5 years, unfortunately. So transport, don't look for transportation right now. They're having a tough time. Aviation, aviation similarly, having a tough time. E-commerce having a great time. Delivery services having a great time again. Concierge services again doing good. Manufacturing, not a lot of product management in general, but yes, doing good. But so it's not an even market, but there are some sectors which are really doing good in this market. You should identify those sectors for now.
Right. Again, so talking about like gaining skills, understanding software development process is something that is important. So do you have any books or resources that people can, like how can people understand this? Is it by talking to people or thinking on their own, or maybe reading books?
It's usually just you can Google Agile software development, and I think that brings a lot of resources. There are a lot of product management talks on YouTube as well. I'm not remembering a lot of them, but I will be able to share a bunch of links later. Uh, but just Google Agile product management, and that should be good enough. Agile software development, not product management. So
Right.
usually a lot of companies follow Agile. There are different software development processes as well, but they are like different branches of how things are done. The basic principle remains same.
Right. Again, for design thinking is important. So, I mean, like, what's the best way to inculcate that?
I would say start reading Design of Everyday Things. Don't Make Me Think and Sprint. These three are good books. There are other books, but I don't want to give a long laundry list of books that for you to read. But definitely some of the definite must reads are Design of Everyday Things and Don't Make Me Think and Sprint. Apart from that, design thinking is a very, very broad term. Often at times as product managers, you will have designers working with you. Uh, you are not expected to make high fidelity designs as a product manager, but you should have an understanding of what might work and what might not. So a clear example of something that I've learned over the years is that if you put too much text on a page, people don't read that. That is something I can, even when I'm asleep, I can use that theory and come up with a design. So there are things that you just learn over time. You just do user researches and learn, but you're not expected to know that at an entry level. At entry level, you just need to figure out basic things. And if you read those books, you will find out about it, like what is information grouping, what is information hierarchy, uh, why a lot of text is not okay. Some people talk about like I should be able to do something within 3 clicks, but I don't think that makes sense. You should design thinking varies from person to person. When you're coming up with a design, show it to like 10 people, ask them whether they are able to understand or make sense of that design. If they are not, then your design isn't successful. Then you go back to the drawing board and design again. You observe a lot of apps and see how they have done things. Often at times following the convention helps. So if usually there's if you have to have an attachment, if you put a paperclip icon there, people will understand it's attachment because they're used to seeing that in Gmail, Yahoo, and a lot of places. But if you, instead of an attachment, you start putting stapler to it, people will not understand that. So design thinking also asks you to follow convention. as much as possible. So these are the things that are already given in the book, and the book is the best source to know about it. And apart from that, just make design, show
Design
it
of everyday things, right? That book.
I can just write on the chat. Design of everyday things. And then my favorite book is actually Don't Make Me Think. It's a very short book as well. There's another book which is Rocket Surgery Made Easy, which is by the same author. Uh, it it just helps you ask the right questions. And then I would say Sprint by Jack Knapp. These
Right.
books are good enough for you to start thinking about design thinking.
Right. So again, like another question is, do we need system design knowledge, like to the extent of REST APIs, microservices?
Yes.
I mean, so I don't think like specific things are pointed out and questioned in interviews. They just like, is it that way, or like how is it?
That way, but if I have two people with equivalent set of or equivalent quality of interview, and one knows about REST APIs and the other doesn't, I'll definitely prefer one person. Yes, REST API, how do they work? What kind of calls are made? What is an endpoint? How is the JSON structure is there? What is an object? These things help. These things definitely help, because you are ultimately have to work with a developer, and they will talk in this language, and unless you don't understand that, you will have a difficult time understand like making them work as well. So yes, knowledge about REST API will help. You don't have to design system diagrams, but you should be able to read system diagrams. Reading system diagrams help. Like, you should be able to understand uh, what kind of databases exist, what is an instance, what is AWS, what is S3. These things will help. I wouldn't say that if you don't know about these things, it's a deal breaker. But if you do know about these things, it will definitely help in an interview.
Great. And again, like for people who are in college, one way to do it is like build apps, and if they have time. Another way could be internships.
Just go to Code Academy and try to learn.
Right. So what about like internships? Like if they have time to do internships, would it be possible to do an internship in a product like role?
See, the problem with product roles is that usually you spend like 1.5 months understanding the product. So
Right.
you are eventually productive at the end of 6-7 weeks when you finally understand the product and are in a position to start the discovery of the problem. So product management internships for IIT people is a terrible idea, because you just
Right.
get like 2 months.
Right.
So I have told that to people that if you're really interested, and now that I've heard like KGP and some other IITs allow you to take like 6-month internships,
Right.
you are able to do so, then please consider product management internships. Product manager internships are easy to get because, first of all, you pay lesser to interns. They're not on your headcount, and any extra pair of hands is helpful to everyone. So interns are helpful. But 2-month internships, it's a liability in most of the companies, because you spend a lot of time making them understand the product, but they're only productive in the last 1.5 weeks when they're about to head back and wrap up. So if you just have got 2 months with you, I would suggest a software development internship, because you can actually start contributing. And software development knowledge always helps. And if you are developing software for a product company, you will be interacting with a product manager on a day-to-day basis. And you will also like, the more you interact with them, the more you'll get to know what they do in general.
Right. Great. I think like we have addressed a lot of things. Like thanks a lot for this time. We have overshot a little, and hopefully like it's been a lot of things have been covered. Like hopefully people can pick up things relevant to them. Like they are at different stages of their career. But anything like to wrap it up? Anything to summarize from your end?
I'm just going through a question. If I find something really interesting, I'll answer. Just give me a sec. I think most of the questions are answered. One thing is that if you are switching for software role to product management role, that's the easiest path, frankly.
Okay.
If a software developer wants to become a product manager entry role, you already have the technical understanding. You just need to develop a little bit of design thinking and a little bit of stakeholder management. So if you already have a software development background, you have the best chance already. So and then there are questions like, can you tell more about technical skill? Jira is not a technical skill. It's a tool that you use. SQL and Excel. SQL is a querying language. Excel is a software. So again, SQL and Excel helps. Jira is just a tool. It's not expected that you know Jira, and frankly, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to learn Jira. How to use Jira, in fact. Then how did you transition from Grab to Zendesk? I started applying one like this. That's the only thing.
This is a question you might have addressed, but like, so common questions are identify a problem and build for it, and improve a famous product. These are questions in campus interviews. How
Yes.
do you approach such questions?
See, uh, so the question itself answers it, right? If you have to improve a famous product, just pick a famous product and start improving it. So what I do is that when I'm given that kind of question, and this recently happened with me last year, I was asked to make a product better. So you don't take an easy product to make better, you take a hard product to make better. So what I picked WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is already a very, very mature product. And if you are making any small changes that improve that product, you are making probably that changes for millions of people. So the scale of that problem becomes very high. So just try to Google a bit like what kind of problems do WhatsApp users face recently, and then try to come up with your solution on how you can build
But
that.
like for you, in your case, did you have to think on the spot, or were you already thinking about these things in general in life?
So I was asked to think on the spot. I was given like a couple of minutes. So I just took my example there. So I was given like, hey, can you improve WhatsApp? So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I just started solving a problem that I face on a daily basis. So what happens is that I get added to groups, a lot of them, just random people from school, college add me, and then random discussions start there, and gets very annoying because you get a lot of notifications. So I just thought that's a problem, and if I am facing that problem, many people will be facing that problem as well, and why not solve that problem? So I just started solving that. So I took example from Google Groups, because in Google Groups, uh, if you are added, you are supposed to go and accept an invitation, and then you get added. And similarly, there are other WeChat groups and even Telegram groups as well, where you need to be added through a link or approval. But in WhatsApp earlier, I think they have changed it recently, but earlier anybody could just add you to any group. So you just pick one problem and then start talking about how you can solve that problem. So you can take cues from other product, but you have to obviously change the context with respect to WhatsApp.
Great. Let's check. I think you have answered most of the questions. Again, like I see a similar pattern of how do you move from business development to product? How do you move from operations to product? I think like to recall what you said was whatever problems you have solved in your previous role, if you can like clearly articulate it and it shows in your answers, like that should be enough.
So for people who are moving from operations and BD into product, I think the best entry is within your company itself, because you already understand the company, you already know the people. You hardly have to go through interview process. You just need to talk to your product team. Hey boss, is there any opening? I'm interested for it. So the easiest switches for BD and ops people will be within your company. If you can manage that, then you get a shot of product management, get a shot at product management within your company, and then you move to a different company later, whenever, whichever company you want to move to. So try within your company yourself. It's first of all, because those guys already know you, those guys already know what you have accomplished. So it really gets easier there.
Right. Great. All right.
Somebody asked about microservices. You should know what a microservice is. Apart from that, you don't need to know what microservices are.
Right.
As long as an engineer comes and says that, hey, I'm not able to handle the load, this service needs to convert to, it's a monolith right now, and we need to convert into this many microservices, then you should be first of all able to understand what the microservice is helpful with. And then you should be able to ask the engineers like, how are you, like what problem are you solving? if you are solving this problem, what scale? Like he will say that we are getting like 1,000 queries per second right now. If I convert it to microservices, I will be able to get like, I will be able to handle 1 lakh queries per second. But are you, as a product manager, you know that whether you are getting 10x more hits in one day or the next 1 month or 2 months. So you can help that engineer make a decision like, hey boss, we are not scaling 10x right now. Maybe you don't need to convert into microservices. You can work on a feature instead of building like changing this. So it just helps. Knowing what a microservice helps. Apart from that, not much.
Right. So I think like, if people have further questions, you're reachable on LinkedIn, right? So
Yes, I'll try to answer as much.
Yeah.
I think I still could find a few people that, like, yeah, try to make your question more specific. Then I'll be happy to answer. Don't ask generic questions, please. And if you are spending time researching on your question, I'll spend time answering your question as well. So yeah, if there are no more questions, I think we can call it a day.
Somebody asked about the video. Yeah, we will share the video with you guys.
And cool. Thanks, Jaren, and thanks Ashish for hosting this. And happy to talk more if you guys need later as well.
Sure.
Yeah, one interesting question is work-life balance for a PM. It really depends on the company in which you are working right now. Zendesk is a software as a service company. There are lesser fires to fight at times. If you are in a smaller setup, there can be more fires to fight at times. There have been at times where I have been called at 2 a.m. in the night that hey, something is not working. Then you are the right person to know who is the right person to fix that problem, because you are the ultimate product manager for that particular feature. So yes, it really depends on which company you are working with. Perfect. All right. Thanks
All right,
again.
man. Thanks a lot for your time. And if I think like this gives like a lot of information out there. I think if like we can probably do more specific sessions focused on like a specific segment, like be it somebody already in product or somebody looking to switch. I think we can do that in the future.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Anyways, it's a lockdown, so I have a lot of time.
yeah.
It's a good
I
time
think
to.
like I think what's a lot of people have like little visibility of from a company's perspective, like the technical skills and the so-called things are out there to learn, like
Right. So
on
see,
the internet.
product management interviews are actually lesser stressful than a lot of other software interviews. You are eventually talking to a product manager, and it's actually, it just needs to be an interesting talk.
Right.
And you don't have to, like, I know like software engineering interviews, you have to cram all the uh, algorithms, you have to go back and check all the sorting mechanisms, and there are like specific technical questions asked. I don't think product interviews specifically ask you for technical interviews. You just need to be a very sound logical individual, and there needs to be some level of confidence in what you are answering. So it just takes
Like,
practice.
did you do any mock interviews, like practice it with people or yourself?
Yes, dude, like I did a lot of them.
Okay.
I think that everybody should do that, regardless of the fact whether you are applying for a PM role or any other role. An interview is it's a very short amount of time where you are supposed to showcase yourself, and you should make the most of that time. If you are going unprepared for it, you are just losing an opportunity.
Right. Great. I think we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah.
Good, everyone. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Stay
Thanks.
safe.